Are there cases you have seen either recently or just generally in your experience that have shocked you, either one for the scale of the attack, the audacity of the attack, or also at the other end, a large corporation or large entity has fallen prey because they've not made basic attempts at stopping these things from happening?
Sure. So, I think we see a lot of breaches every day, right? What you tend to see in the newspapers, probably, I would say 5%, if that. We investigate more. Turns out there are Chinese backdoors because we can see the IP addresses, we can see the language. And then as we find out more, they've been there for about 3 years. 3 years, they have free reign of every single system across the group. And that's scary enough, but it gets worse.
I'm an average guy. I have a bank account that I access digitally. I use UPI, I use credit cards, I pay through my phone, all the standard things that everybody uses today. Tell me how I am vulnerable in those examples and any other examples you think that I'm not even thinking about right now.
I think 2 parts, right? So one is where you're vulnerable, and that's having...
So this is my wallet, and in it I have 1 credit card. So Yash, I'm going to give you my wallet. I want you to imagine that somehow you have got access to my wallet.
Sure.
And walk me through what you're doing while you do it.
So this is a device called a Flipper Zero, which is essentially a hacker's toolkit is what, I think they literally sell it as, right? So I've used it in cases where somebody has a wallet in their back pocket and you just walk past a beep and it's safe to use.
My guest today on the Krish Kothari Show is Yash Kadakia. Yash runs one of the most innovative and fascinating cybersecurity companies in India. SecurityBrigade and Shadowmap serve companies and customers all around the world, helping them with cybersecurity and staying safe. I was particularly interested in having this conversation not only because of recent cases of cybersecurity issues, but also because it's something that touches all of our lives, unfortunately. All of us know of cases among our friends and families where people have suffered at the hands of phishing and other scams. All of us, unfortunately, know of cases where people we know have been affected by such scams. I hope you find this conversation not only very useful, but also very interesting. Yash has some incredible stories that he shares with us on different examples of cybersecurity issues that face not only companies, but also individuals like us. A lot of work goes into making all of these videos, so please like, subscribe and hit the bell icon. It really does help us. Also, let us know in the comments what you think of our videos. It helps us understand what content and topics are of interest to you. You can now find us and our podcast and many other interesting channels on the Zerodha Media Network.
So this is my wallet, and in it I have 1 credit card. And in front of me, I have an aspiring criminal who's going to see if he can steal that information on this card. So Yash, I'm going to give you my wallet. I want you to imagine that somehow you have got access to my wallet.
Sure.
And walk me through what you're doing while you do it.
So this is a device called a Flipper Zero, which is essentially a hacker's toolkit is what, I think they literally sell it as, right? It can scan RFID cards, NFC cards, Wi-Fi hacking, and a whole bunch of stuff in it, right? So we use it a lot for our customer assessments, where we'll literally in this way, not necessarily credit cards, but we'll walk around offices and steal their access cards and then use that to walk into restricted areas, right? So it's really, really, really straightforward where I'm literally just selecting NFC because that's your credit card protocol. And I'm just going to put it on. Usually takes a second or so, and it's going to clone your card and make it available. It's saved on my phone, on the device.
Okay.
Which means that I can now walk into anywhere where they'll accept an NFC card.
Yeah.
Hit emulate, tap, and it should pay.
So basically anywhere where there's a POS device which allows you to tap a credit card, you can now use my card.
Yeah, but think about it the same way as Google Pay on your phone, right? Where you can add a credit card to your Google Pay and then use it anywhere. It's essentially doing that.
Right.
But it lets me do it. So I've used it in cases where somebody has a wallet in their back pocket and you just walk past a beep and it's safe to use.
I can't open a newspaper without reading about some sort of cyber attack, cyber fraud, something. Starting at an individual level where it's, some guy stealing like $5,000 from someone's account, all the way up to the largest corporations in the world who get defrauded for millions of dollars. And what I wanted to understand from you is, are there cases you have seen either recently or just generally in your experience that have shocked you, either one for the scale of the attack, the audacity of the attack, or also at the other end, if you think that a large corporation or large entity has fallen prey because they've not made basic attempts at stopping these things from happening?
Sure. I think we see a lot of breaches every day, right? What you tend to see in the newspapers, probably, I would say 5%, if that. It's getting better where obviously more compliance and regulations are coming in where people tend to report them. But the stuff we hear about offline is the nastiest stuff. I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So we had one very, very large conglomerate where we were called in to do some assessments, and we went in and we're doing our assessments. Midway through, and when I say assessments, I mean security audits, right? Midway through the security assessment, we start seeing something that looks like a backdoor. We go talk to the relevant team, and they're like, okay, fine, let's investigate. And we spend a couple of days investigating. And this is a large conglomerate group which has a lot of critical projects across the country, right? We go investigate, and we find out that there are backdoors. We investigate more. Turns out there are Chinese backdoors because we can see the IP addresses, we can see the language. And then as we find out more, they've been there for about 3 years. 3 years, they have free reign of every single system across the group. And that's scary enough, but it gets worse. We find all of this out, and we have a report, and we take this report and we go to the group CTO's office and we have this discussion. He picks up the report eventually, dumps it in the dustbin, and says this conversation never happened, and just walks away, and that's it. And this is again super common, right? Because it's a lose-lose for him. Second, he goes up to management and says, hey, they've been sitting in our systems for 3 years. He's either getting fired, and there is no upside for him. So there's also fundamental conflict of interest, right? Security probably should not report to tech is this thing there. But so that's one example, right? So that's one that we see. We've seen a government power plant in India where again the same thing happened, right? We did an assessment. We found the hackers have been there for 3-4 years, controlling all sorts of critical projects, critical infra internally, and they had no idea until we pointed it out. It's just a lot of these sort of incidents. So you have your Star Health Insurance that just happened right now, which I think fits into the audacity category of that, right? And through whatever means, I'm not sure, right? They got a whole bunch of the data. They then reached out and tried to negotiate and be like, hey, listen, pay us X amount of money and we'll keep it quiet, right? So that happened. And then when the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, basically said no, they published it online and made it look like the CISO sold them the data. So it's interesting because every time these guys steal data now, they're coming up with more and more ways to incentivize you to pay. And this has now become more of a personal attack for the next CISO to be like, hey, listen, do I want to really risk my future career prospects? And so we're seeing a lot more interesting cases like that, right? But at the same time, 99% of cases that actually happen don't come out publicly. India, up until very recently, didn't have disclosure laws. So there was no need for a company that gets hacked to actually talk about it. Today, there are disclosure laws that IT Act has put in a law that you have to disclose any incident to certain and that sort of thing, but it doesn't really happen, right? From a company's perspective, I think the critical thing is the conflict of interest.
Okay.
And I think that's a challenge, massive challenge, right? Risk, security, always report into IT. So I think that because it's incredibly hard for a company to get good at security if your boss is the one who gets blamed for the mess up in the first place, right? So that's the biggest challenge I see with companies. There has to be board level reporting. There has to be leadership visibility into your risk, right? So that because like I mentioned in the earlier example, right, one of the biggest challenges we see is folks hiding things from management. Because they know the second it goes to management, they are the ones going to be held accountable. They're the ones who are going to get blamed. And they might get fired or some sort of action, right? It's the same with the regulation as well. There was a case in the US right now, I can't remember the company, where there was a massive cybersecurity incident. The chief information security officer was held legally liable, was taken to court, prosecuted. I think they eventually got off though. So it makes it much less likely that the CISO wants to report to regulatory authorities then if they're going to be blamed for it. So there has to be some Because the thing is, I can give you advice on the technical aspect, right?
Right.
But none of that is going to actually solve a fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is how do we make sure that communication is going upwards correctly and decisions are being taken appropriately, right? So that's one challenge, right? But I think the other takeaway for corporates is there's just somebody always going to be out there to take money, right?
Yeah.
There is much more incentive for an attacker to get $100,000 than there is for you to save $100,000. Just that scales, right?
Right.
And that unevenness is always a challenge because you have to do every single thing correctly and the hacker has to find one mistake. So the odds are very much skewed against you.
Yeah. So in this power plant example, in theory, the guys who had hacked in, whoever they were, could, with a push of a button from anywhere in the world, shut down the power plant. Am I being too dramatic? Like that's the stuff you see in the movies, but is that actually possible?
So in this case, it is. So all of these companies have IT and they have OT. OT is operational technology and it's usually segregated.
Okay.
So the idea is IT is your computers, your Wi-Fi and all of that stuff, right? And that's all one network. And then your OT is the stuff that's actually controlling the plants, the SCADA systems, all of the stuff that's going to have a physical impact, right? The floodgates are going to open or the floodgates are stuff of that nature, literally though.
Yeah.
They're usually segregated. In this case, it wasn't.
Yeah.
So ideally, it's supposed to be this stuff is on a completely separate air gap network. You can't go from A to B. So if you remember I think what is called Pegasus, where allegedly the US government went and compromised Iran's nuclear program, was exactly that. They had a separate OT network and they somehow managed to jump the air gap and do it, right? So that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
In this case, it wasn't. So they would have technically been able to do all of that.
But do you think it's mostly state actors in this? Like
I think earlier that used to be the case. Pre-ransomware generation, that was the case, right? Where there wasn't really a financial motive for an individual to go after an organization that doesn't have data they can sell, right? So like a power plant. But I think in the ransomware and the Bitcoin generation, that has changed drastically. So today, if I hack anything, right? It's a pharma company, it's a power plant, doesn't matter. I can hold them hostage. And that's essentially what happens, right? And we saw that with the Star Health case as well. But so they will encrypt everything they have. They will basically say, hey, if you don't have backups, you need to pay us. But then they have a secondary model. So they say, okay, we're going to encrypt everything. You pay us to get your data back. If you happen to have a backup of the data, you pay us to keep quiet about it or not publish all your data online. So and now the Star Health model is at the third angle where they've said, you pay us or we're going to defame the CISO and ruin his career prospects. So that future CISOs are afraid, right? Yeah. So I think they're coming up with more innovative business models. It's genuinely that, right? And I will talk more about the ransomware at some point. But when you look at ransomware as a model, it's incredibly complicated. It's no longer what everybody imagines as one guy sitting in a basement breaking into stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. And that CISO example that you gave, so it's interesting. So I was reading recently about one of the most successful bank robbers in American history. And you would think that he was successful because he went with guns and heavy artillery or something. He actually never used weapons. His biggest tool was his ability to convince the employees of that branch that it is not in their interest to fight him. And his most important line was, it's not your money anyway. Don't risk your life for it. So the whole point is that if you think of it from, CISO, I'm not talking about this case. I'm just saying in general, his incentive structure is simply that, do I really want to make myself the scapegoat in this situation, or should I just put my hands up and say, look, this is beyond my control? So I guess it's that kind of powerful incentive at work. Yeah, and that's a big challenge for the security industry, right? So I'll give you an example. We had a customer. This customer decides to be proactive, right? So in his proactiveness, he reached out to us and he opted to do an assessment that they normally didn't do. And when we did it, we found a whole bunch of really bad things. Sorry, just to clarify, you're not talking about the insurance company. You're saying it's separate. Yeah.
So we found I don't mean bad things that have been hacked, but just vulnerabilities, right? Ways they could have got hacked. Yeah. A bunch of gaps in the systems, and we found them and they got fixed. But he got in a lot of trouble with his management because they were just like, why were they there in the first place? And from the CISO's perspective, it's Schrodinger's cat, right? It's just, do I open this box or do I not? And that conflict of interest is a challenge that you will see across the space, right? Right. So that's interesting. So let's actually look at it from the other angle. Imagine you actually were a criminal and your day job was to hack into companies and their systems. And either it is in terms of, getting information which you then sell back to them as ransom or for ransom, or it is you are a state actor and it is just in your interest to have control over that if required.
And imagine I'm saying, okay, take your power plant example, or let's say critical infrastructure more generally.
Yeah.
What is your first port of call in terms of getting into their systems? How do you go about it? Walk me through that process. I know obviously a lot of it is very technical, but just I want the basic understanding of how that happens.
So honestly, I would love to sell it as something that's super technical, but it's not.
Okay.
90. So, and we do this. This is what we do, right? 90% of red teams that we do, where we are the hackers trying to break into an organization.
So sorry, just to clarify. So red team is you're the good guys pretending to be hackers.
Yes, we're literally pretending to be hackers, where we might physically walk into your office, we might call you and impersonate a CXO, we might send you a phishing email, we might hack something. We'll do any means necessary to get to the objectives. That's the idea, right?
Right.
And 90% of assessments that we do, and I'm talking about the largest companies in the world, right? We will get in because people have passwords that are month at year, or location at year, or company at 1, 2, 3, and some variation of that. And I'm not joking, right? It's legitimately, I would say, what we'll normally do is we'll acquire a list of employees, right, through LinkedIn or something of that sort. And then we'll try to guess these passwords. And I would say probably 10% of the employee workforce, across I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of employees, will fall into these passwords.
Is the most common password still password?
No. It's usually these. It's month at year, because all of your businesses ask people to change passwords every month. Nobody wants to remember new passwords. So they just go, what month is it, at year, and add a couple of special characters to meet the requirement.
Right.
Or then we'll see location. So we'll be like, okay, the company is based in Mumbai. Okay, let's look at Yarnet 123, Dombivli 123, and you'll get a bunch of people. And it's incredible because they've invested all of this money in doing all the security stuff. And eventually we're just guessing the password, getting in, and we don't even need to. I mean, there are much more technical ways to get in, but we just don't need to bother. Because we just get passwords and then start logging in. And now that everything's in the cloud, it means that once you got that password, you can access so much stuff from the outside.
Yash, we're going to get back to the serious conversation, but I just want to ask you one question I've always wondered. So you see all these heist movies and all of that, right? And I mean, there's like a million examples of it, and in Hollywood, Bollywood, everywhere. And there's always in the team who are actually the good guys in the movie, there'll be that one, nerdy, geeky guy on the laptop somewhere. And at some point in the movie, he's crucial because he has to hack into some government agency and change how the guys look and change their names and all of that. So again, without getting into any particular movie, I just want to ask you, how realistic do you find is that even remotely possible?
So some things are.
Okay.
And some are not, right? I think maybe hacking into some database to change a password, change a photo may be possible. Right? Using it to control signals, less so generally, but again possible, right? So all of it it's I think from when most of these movies were shown, it probably wasn't possible. Today, now that all of this stuff is controlled by OT and by networks, it probably is more. It's my dream, though. To control the signal system is my absolute dream.
I think we're thinking of the exact same movie. It's like, I'm just thinking of the Italian Job, and the guy's sitting on the luggage conveyor. What's it called? The luggage belt, and fantastic scene. But so now I've always wanted to ask that, and I can't think of a better person to ask that. But I want to come back again, and I feel like I know all my questions are broadly coming back to just tell me stories. That's literally what I want from you. I'm just morbid curiosity, and I want to hear stories from you. So can you think of, again, whether it's I'm actually trying to think of examples that the breach is at a corporate level, but it kind of affects people like you and me. Of course, banks and financial institutions are the obvious examples, but I'm sure this happens across the board, across industries. So are there cases that you can think of that affect both sides of the coin?
Yeah, a couple of them that are really interesting, right? So there's one this happened a few years ago. I can't remember the exact timeline, but it was a customer of ours, and they were implementing something called a DLP. This is one of the big e-commerce players, right?
Okay, sorry, what is a DLP?
DLP is a data loss prevention system. So the idea is that anytime somebody's sending some data out of the company, it checks what the data is and against patterns. Right? Is it a list of Aadhaar cards, or is it a list of credit cards? So you can define what the data is, and it blocks it if it is, right? So make sure data loss doesn't happen. They implemented it, but they didn't tell anybody they implemented it, right?
Okay.
For the first month, every single day somebody was picked up and somebody was fired.
Oh my God.
Because there was all of this, and startups don't tend to do security until much later in the game, right? So inherently. So when this happened, there was this one case they picked out, e-commerce player, where this woman was there who would every 6 months change her jobs.
Okay.
And every 6 months she would go to the 4 or 5 competitors she would circle. Now, why was very interesting. The hack itself wasn't interesting, right? She would take the data, take the Excel, email it out, and that was that. The why was her husband ran a small business
Okay.
that would sell the same thing to those customers. So every time she would send this data, the husband's team would start calling up those customers and say, hey, I can offer you a better deal for this particular requirement, and take that lead. And then every 6 months, she would change to a different startup, different competitor, and do the same thing again. And they had no idea this was happening. They got the DLP in, it got flagged as data going out, customer data going out. They investigated, and then they found this whole story where it was
incredible.
The jugaad is just strong.
Yeah, I can think of a million. I'm thinking even like basic. I'm imagining you think of, say, I'm buying a TV and there's 5-6 big companies I can go to, and there's somebody who knows that, okay, Krish wants to buy a TV. He's willing to spend, say, for example, 100 rupees. And then her husband's running a TV business. He's like, okay, I'll give it for $90. And it's like, it is a ready customer. It's and I'm sure it's if you think of financial services and all, it's even more than that.
It was much larger, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's also, you see a lot of that scam happen at the call center level, right?
Okay.
Where, you've got this call center person who's getting paid a minimum essential salary, right?
Right.
But they have access to all of this data. They know who's buying what, who's signing up for what policy. So, something as simple as every single time your car insurance is about to expire, you get calls from everybody else. Right?
Yeah.
That data's come from somewhere. And it's super common, right? So we had a customer, which was an insurance company, and we were doing a bunch of security stuff for them. And they came back to us and saying, we have this really peculiar problem. We don't know what's happening. But every time somebody comes to our website and plugs a inquiry, right, saying, I want to buy car insurance, I want to buy something, within an hour, a competitor calls them. We don't know what's happening, right? So, and they tried it themselves, right? The CISO team went in front of us, plugs in a random phone number, email, and within an hour, a call comes. And it's a particular competitor, right? And we're just trying to figure, and we send our folks and we start investigating over a few weeks. Eventually, we realized that there was some API, something that they had open that was exposing that data, which was a security flaw that they should fix. But it turned out that, and when they looked at the IP logs and they actually went through a legal process, they found out there was a particular aggregator or a company that aggregates leads between insurance companies who was stealing that information and selling it to a competitor. So we see a lot of fraud on that level, right? Call center level, aggregator level, where it's not the large corporate doing the fraud. It's the smaller middleman that's willing to look the other way.
Right.
And sell to the larger corporate. And the corporate has no idea it's happening, right?
Right.
So you see tons of fraud around that as well at the corporate level.
Incredible. And like you said, that it's the unfortunate thing of a large organization, one bad apple and it's beyond anyone's control. These days when you walk into a building and you often have to sign in as a guest, should you ever leave your number and information there?
I don't. I don't see the upside of doing it. Right? The downside is that somebody's going to sell your data for spam or something else. I don't know, right?
Right.
At scales, it's certainly happening, but I always just change one digit.
Exactly.
I just change a random digit along the way and it's fine. So my wife's always very confused by this, right? Whenever a credit card slip comes, I never actually sign. I just scribble something.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm not giving my signature off to everybody in the world. So,
got it. I'd say in the last few years, there have been very high profile cases in India and globally of, I guess I care more about this given what I do, but content creators who've lost control of their channels, whether it's on a variety of different social media platforms. I'm not singling anyone out. How does that happen? I'm trying to understand that the only person, I'll give you my example, the only person who has access to mine is me. So I have to put in a username, password, whatever to get in. How in what ways am I vulnerable in that situation?
So it's generally going to be one of 2 or 3 things I can think of, right? A is phishing.
Okay.
Super common, right? Because again, in this case, it's a one-on-one target.
So give me an example. So you send me an email. How does that work?
They'll send you an email that, say they're targeting your YouTube channel, right? They'll send you an email pretending to be Google, YouTube, a copyright strike, something of that sort that gets your attention, right?
Right.
Tries to get you to click through, give credentials away, right? So that's one mechanism that we'll see. Second is, now that the dark web's come at play, so one of the things that we do as part of the Shadowmap platform, right, is we monitor all of these dark web breaches where we're tracking passwords that have been compromised.
Okay.
So what happens is, you set up an account on Zomato and Zomato gets hacked, for example, right? All of those passwords start showing up on the dark web. So password reuse is another factor that tends to have a big role here, right? Where people will reuse passwords or even the similar passwords, right? Once you get an idea, you can always figure it out and bridge the last mile and get in. So those are usually what we see, right? Social engineering. So This is not as much of a problem in India right now. But in the US, we've seen tons of social media folks getting compromised because they'll call their telecom operator, pretend to be them and get their phone numbers routed or whatever, that sort of thing, right? Because it's all social ID, social security number driven. So they will call up T-Mobile and be like, hey, listen, I've lost my phone. I need XYZ to be done. And they'll convince them to redirect SMSs and they'll use that as well. It doesn't work as well in India right now.
I don't know how true any of this is, but I've heard a wide range of types of scam. Well, I use the word scam broadly, but cyber attacks or whatever you want to call them. Different types of cyber attacks that have been used to target companies of all sizes.
Yeah.
It's not just the large guys that people are going after, right? They're going after the quote unquote mom and pop shops as well. So can you tell me what are, in your experience, things that you've seen, different ways that hackers can target such companies and use sophisticated but not complicated ways to get information and then, whatever it is they do with that to get money out of it?
Right. So one is your data breach ransomware angle, right? Where you'll get in your CCO gets an email, says we have all of your data, we have some sample data, pay up, this is the price.
So sorry.
Yeah.
In that case, does it make sense to pay up? Is it just case by case?
It depends. Yeah, it's case by case, right? What does your reputation mean to you? Do you have backups? That's number one, right? Is your business going to literally shut down if you don't have access to the data? We had a customer, there was a pharma company in the US where they had this happen and their factory shut down for a week. So they were just willing to pay whatever it was. It didn't matter because operationally they were losing more money. So it depends on those sort of factors, right? We've seen customers that have backups. There's no operational impact and yet they pay up from a reputation perspective. They're just worried about if the name gets out there, there'll be regulatory questions, there will be customer issues. So I think it depends. There isn't a right answer. Generally, we see that there is honor among thieves. Fortunately, they will generally honor the deal.
Yeah.
Generally, because if they don't, the next guy is not going to pay.
Right.
They know that, right? They know reputation matters. Funnily enough, right? Like I said, these are not they're not small individuals. They're businesses. So I think it depends. It's generally a bad idea.
Bad idea to pay.
It's generally a bad. I mean, if you have to pay, you have to pay. But I would say generally it's a bad idea because it paints a target on you. So they will honor the deal, but they will also happily tell everybody else they know that this guy pays up. So maybe focus your efforts on his businesses. If you can hack him, you have a payday as well, right? And that's how it works. So
and I guess like you're saying, the business models are evolving. I guess pricing is so important, right? If it's sometimes you want, I mean, it's worth the effort of hacking, but it's not so large that you're pricing them out of where it's in their interest to just pay the amount because it doesn't really make that much difference and they can keep things quiet. Yash, you've done a fantastic job of scaring me at this point. So now I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to figure out what are the different ways in which I am vulnerable? Okay, let's say I'm an average guy. I have a bank account that I access digitally. I use UPI. I use credit cards. I pay through my phone. All the standard things that everybody uses today. Tell me how I am vulnerable in those examples and any other examples you think that I'm not even thinking about right now.
So I think two parts, right? So one is where you're vulnerable, and that's having two-factor authentication everywhere, making sure OTPs are everywhere, all of that, right? That's one big part of the mistake that most people do where they don't enable that. Second is ease of scam. And that's not necessarily vulnerable, right? So I don't use UPI, for example. Or I don't even necessarily use offline banking. I have no way to pull money out of my personal accounts. I have to make a call if I want money out of my personal accounts, right? Corporate, different, but personal, I don't. But because I think there's an ease of scam, right? And the scammers are only getting smarter. All of these job scam, and there's new ideas coming up every day, right? And the easier it is to pull that money out and transfer it, the more likely that just statistics that somebody you know is going to get scammed. So my dad's not allowed to have UPI or online banking. Like you need to make a payment, you call me up, you call the office up, we'll figure it out, right? We'll get it done for you.
Right.
Because it's just eventually, have you seen the new scams where they call you up and they pretend to be a police station?
Yes.
Your son's been arrested for some sort of crime, or your son or your daughter has been arrested for some sort of crime. They use AI to replicate their voice to talk to you, and then they ask you to pay up. It's just, it's impossible for somebody to not fall for this stuff eventually.
And I'm going to use this as a segue to talk specifically about your companies. Sure. So I'm broadly going to, I know there's other parts to it, but broadly I'm going to talk about Shadowmap and I'm going to talk Security Brigade. Explain to me, so let's say imagine I'm a bank, okay? I'm a big bank in India. And I come to you and say, boss, help me, I'm in trouble. There's just too many things going on. I need your help. Explain to me what you do in that situation and what are the different ways that you can not only protect them, but even help them in case there is a data breach.
Sure. So all of these banks, they do a lot of different things for security, right? They're building security. So they're buying products, licenses. They're doing all of these different things to build it, right? Where we come in on the services side is our job is to break it. So we're literally the bad guys, where they'll call us in and say, pretend you're the bad guy, spend a month, 2 months, 3 months, depending on the size of the company, just trying to break into our systems, right? And then when you break into our systems, you document how it happened. Did we detect it? Did we respond to it? So the idea is, I think of it as a stress test, because they've spent all this money. They've bought all these fancy security devices. The vendors told them there's AI and there's machine learning and all of this stuff, right? They've gone and hired SOC teams, which are security operations centers, responding to these attacks. But eventually, when an attack happens, do they actually pick it up? Do they respond to it? Did they detect it? If they respond, how do they respond? So what we are doing is just we're gonna really go after you. We're going to use all of those means, right? We're gonna use AI voice cloning. We're going to use phishing emails. We're going to hack stuff. We're gonna do all of that and try to go after your crown jewels, right? Whatever they may be. So if you're a pharma company, after the formulations and all of that, you're a manufacturing unit, your OT environments, whatever it might be, right? And the idea is that you then figure out, did you stop it? Did you detect it? Did you prevent it? If not, what failed at what level? You address it, and then we iterate and we do it again, and we do it again.
Right.
We'll keep doing that, right? So that's one part what we do. The other part, the Shadowmap piece, is around monitoring. So the services side tries to prevent it from happening. The monitoring side tries to identify if it's happened. Where we'll monitor the dark web, we'll monitor data breaches, we'll monitor phishing sites, we'll literally scan the whole of the internet every day to look for people that are abusing your brand, your logos, your information, and then try to let you know when it's happened so you can respond to it. So it's sort of two sides of the coin.
Yeah, sorry. And, I'm going to go back to what you initially started with. So again, go back to my example. I'm a bank, I've hired you. So let's start at most ground level. Walk me through specific instances that you guys have, things that you have done and the different ways in which you have managed to actually breach security.
And the password thing I spoke about, right? Yeah. That's always number one, but it's a lot of really creative means. Right? It's not always straightforward. So we've done things like literally we have a guy on retainer whose job is just to print fake lanyards and access cards. That's literally his job, right?
Okay.
So our admin will send an email out saying, please print a fake one for this bank. And then they'll go to the Instagram. They'll go to Instagram, search for the office address, find the last Diwali party where somebody put up a bunch of photos, zoom in, see the access card template, design it in Photoshop, print a bunch of cards out. Right? We'll put them on, put the lanyard on. If it's a startup, we'll get a t-shirt made so that we really blend in, right? We'll do all of that. We'll go at lunch hours and just walk right in, right? Nobody checks. Absolutely nobody checks, right? Walk right in, walk into an office, find an empty meeting room, sit down, plug in, you're on the network, start hacking stuff, right? That's, the simplest way, right? We've done things like social engineering where we'll call up an employee and say, hey, listen, you're working for XYZ bank. I am the HR from some other bank, right? I want to set up an interview. We've done that. And then they reveal a bunch of information on call, right? Tell me how this works. How do you configure it? How do you set it up? What security controls are you using? They reveal everything. We've applied for jobs where, again, for these red teams where our HR will go prepare a resume exactly as per the JD, right? Ideal candidate, apply for the job. The guy, of course, gets called in, walks into the office, walks into a meeting room. HR goes somewhere, they plug in something into the network and they have access now.
Oh, man.
So it's just so many different ways.
Yeah.
And that's just the physical stuff, right? And then, of course, digitally, it's a cat and mouse game when it comes to actual technical cybersecurity, right? Where every time you patch stuff, there are new issues that come out. Every time there are new issues that come out, I have to scan for them, find them, and I can use that to hack that server, get into that server, and then start moving across the network and going from there, right?
And I feel like a big problem just in the way things work is, at some level, your only option as a protector is to be reactive because the hacker is constantly innovating. And there's a million ways he can innovate. And it's only after he has chosen a specific path that you know he's chosen that path. So it's not like you can prevent all million things going ahead. You have to wait for him to try something. So it's I mean, like you said, that cat and mouse game, and you have no choice but to play second, right? You're always black in chess, right? It's just the unfortunate way things work.
I think it's also when we do our assessments, for example, if the same customer comes to me 4 times a year to do an assessment, we break in all 4 times for the different pathways.
Right.
So the idea is, and I always tell customers this, right? The idea is not to fix the issues. It's to fix your response. Did you detect us or not? Why not? Fix that part of the problem, right? So that the next time somebody breaks in, the response works and hopefully you can catch it and cut it off, right?
Right.
Because it's, and think about it this way, right? You are a giant bank, right? And any not just a bank, any organization, right? It's always hard to get budgets for things that are preventive. Nobody wants to spend money on security, right? It's something that never happened earlier. Like we struggled in 2006 when we started, we struggled to get the big banks to spend money, right? With blatant flaws sitting in their systems, and we struggled. Today, it's much better. They have a lot larger budgets, but still they struggle, right? The hacker on the other end, some bunch of kids, some group sitting somewhere, right? One decent hit in the year, and that's $100,000, $200,000 in Bitcoin delivered to your house, no taxation, no nothing. And it's incentive, right? So that person is incentivized to spend the whole year just going after you, which means, and it's now goes to a different layer, right? So when you look at ransomware today, it's a supply chain.
Okay. Explain that. Sorry, what do you mean?
I did a talk about this recently at a conference, right? And most people don't recognize, even the most tech senior leadership don't know this now. But the way ransomware works is it's a franchise model. So say, for example, you are a ransomware group, right? You have gone and built a ransomware, built a marketing channel around it, right? Where you have PR, you have all of that, right? You have negotiated all of that. You then open up that franchise where anybody can pay you a certain sum of money and become a franchisee. Right? As part of that franchisee, you will give them access to a portal. Okay. On that portal, they have access to download your malware, a custom version of your malware. They have access to upload information on your website where you're announcing who's been breached. So it's a SaaS platform, right? Where they literally are able to use, and like the talk I did, I have screenshots, but like you can see that they have all these interesting mechanisms, right? PR, news, anonymous phone call mechanisms, all of that. They give you all those tools you need to do it, right? That's one part. So you have the franchisee, and the franchisee needs dealers, right? So they will then basically go to some folks called agents, basically be like, hey, listen, you go hack companies, right? Once you hack a company, you bring them to us. As the franchisee will then go negotiate and get value. And if whatever money we get, you get a percentage, and it's a split. So you can sign up to be just a negotiator. If you're a great negotiator, you can sign up to be just a negotiator. And it's a split, right? The franchisee is going to get 10, 20%. The franchise operator is going to get 40%. The agent is going to get 10, 20%. The negotiator is going to get 10, 20%. And everybody's going to get a piece of the pie. And each individual piece is incentivized to, of course, make more money. And that's how the whole thing works. And so the agent will hack into, say, a certain bank, right? They get inside and they realize, oh, it's worth X amount of money. Then they'll go to the relevant franchisee and be like, hey, this is what I've got. Let's work a deal out here. And then the franchisee will bring in a negotiator.
But I'm trying to understand different types of scams. So can you give me specific examples of what that you yourself have seen that companies have faced? Different types of scams in different ways. Not say, even if you just take the world of phishing emails, different ways that they have managed to get into organizations and steal money from them.
So with corporates, right, we see there are 3-4 different types of scams that we see very often.
Okay.
But the bad news is we see success very often. So one is where it's called the fake invoice scam or the fake business email scam. Okay. Very, very common. What they'll do is they'll use one of these data breaches or dark web passwords to hack into somebody's email in that supply chain, right?
Sorry, this is within the organization.
Either end of the organizations, right? Either the supplier or the buyer. They'll hack somebody's email. They'll use that to see the conversation, see the email, see the invoices. They will then go create their own invoice. Okay. They'll copy your letterhead. They will replace the phone numbers with their phone numbers. They'll do all of that. Their bank information. They will buy a domain that's similar to yours. Okay. So they will buy a new domain. So with, say, the I becomes a L, it's impossible to tell by looking at it, right? And then they will send a new email from that email saying, hey, our bank accounts have an issue because of legal problems or some reason. These are the new accounts on our letterhead. Please call the number to verify. The buyer finance team gets the email. They call the phone number on the letterhead to verify. somebody answers, verifies it, right? And then the transfer goes through. And these guys have stolen money. And we see literally a case, I would say several times a week, with people like customers of ours or large Indian companies, that all of them are losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there's no way to get it back in most cases, because it's going to offshore accounts, it's going to foreign bank accounts, and once it's gone, it turns into crypto. They then have supply chains behind that, right? They have mules to move the money, where you've seen those scams where they have check processing scams and stuff, right? Where they'll call you and say, I want to give you a job as a remote employee.
Okay.
Right? Somebody's going to transfer money to your bank account to help you buy laptops or whatever you need.
Okay.
I want you to deduct that amount for the laptops, and whatever's left, you transfer it to my accountant. Right?
Yes.
And then actually the fraud money is coming to your account. You go ahead and transfer it. Eventually what will happen is the bank's going to claw that money back, and you are the one left with holding the bag.
Right.
So it's not as simple as they stole your money from the corporate and they just took the money in their bank and walked around or into crypto, right? There are multiple scams that are tied together that all result in eventually the money ending in some crypto wallet somewhere that's just not traceable at all.
And there's like in your example, there's inadvertent money launderers, right?
Yeah.
Like I have accidentally laundered money with no intention to do so, which is crazy, right? This is like, these are serious crimes. Like, we're laughing about it now because it's such a ridiculous thing to think about, but this happens every day. That's a crazy thing. I'm trying to gauge how big this market is, right? Like, imagine you're in a consulting interview, and I'm like, okay, tell me how big the cyber security, as in terms of the fraud sizes, what kind of money is being lost every year or every month, or so what kind of numbers are we talking about?
It's really, really hard to tell because nobody talks about it, right?
Yeah.
But we see cases, just on my level, I see several cases a week where customers have lost, ranging from probably starting at $100,000 going up to millions. And we see that every week, right? And then when you actually scale that up globally, it's a lot. If one of the big threat actors, I forgot what they're called, something Cozy Bear or something they're called, right?
Okay.
Is actually North Korea's internal state group, but their entire mission it's not data, their mission is money. Because North Korea is not allowed to trade freely as a sanction bypass, they have gotten heavily into ransomware, crypto, data theft, etc., to generate crypto coming in, which then gets laundered and comes as actual hard currency into their accounts.
Right.
So, it's significant money that a state actor felt like that was a decent business for them to get into to fund their operations. It's just, Yeah,
it's crazy. You think of like legitimate state actions. They create businesses. Like in India, they'll make banks and steel companies and all of that. These guys, literally, this is funding the government, right? So it's at a very large level, and that's it's incredible to think of. And I'm going to come back to specific things that you and your company does to solve for these problems, right? So let's take your example of an invoice scam, okay?
Yeah.
So first tell me, at what stage in that? So I have fallen for this. 100 rupees have left my account, it's gone, okay? There's no way of getting it back. In that situation, is there anything you can do to help me, or?
So on that specific invoice scam example, right? Ideally, our role is preventive, right? We should be the ones, so we would ideally be monitoring your mail servers to make sure they're configured correctly so that you're not able to spoof emails. As part of Shadowmap, we'll be monitoring for domains that are similar to yours being registered and be able to prevent all of that, right? So ideally, we would prevent it. Once it's gone, we can't help you get the money back. A lot of our clients tend to have cybersecurity insurance, in which case we can do an audit and confirm that you're not at fault. Maybe it was the vendor at fault or something of that sort. And that's used by the insurance company to then pay you out.
Right.
So that part we can help with, but otherwise, once it's gone, it's a legal matter. You have to go through the process to try to get the money back.
Yeah. And so you gave two examples. You gave the invoice scam. You're saying there are other thing where I inadvertently became a money launderer. And are there other? I really am trying to make it as open because my goal is that people become aware of literally the 100 different ways they can get scammed. So. If you think it's either very interesting just because, like I said, going back to the original question, that just because the audacity or brilliance of it, or also because it's just so effective, so therefore people need to know about it.
I think the AI ones are...
You mean voice cloning?
The voice cloning ones are genuinely brilliant, right? Where they will somehow get the voice clip for... we've seen this on the corporate level and the corporate and the personal level, right? On the corporate level, you'll see this all the time where... it happens to me personally several times a day, right? where our employees will get emails or WhatsApp saying, hey, this is Yash. I'm traveling. I need you to transfer money XYZ or send me gift cards or some version of that, right? It's text sometimes, it's voice notes sometimes. They've got my photo as a display picture, random phone number, all of that, right? So that's one that we see. I mean, it's incredibly effective at scale.
Yeah.
And it's always coming from CXO down, right? So there's always, and we see this with a lot of the larger corporate groups that we work with, right? So the CXO in absolutely no way knows the breadth of the team, right? There's hundreds of thousands of employees. And when you get that message saying, hey, I'm visiting our plant in Turkey, I have an emergency, I need XYZ, this person asked me to reach out to you, it's easy to fall for it.
Yeah.
Right. And then the employee really gets in hard soup there because you can't even ask the company to compensate. It's not, there was no involvement on the company on that end, right? So it's a tricky situation.
Yeah.
But then you'll see that on the personal level with, I don't know if you've seen this, right? It's incredible. The production, I mean, I've always said this to customers over the years, is if there's a buck to be made, somebody in India is going to make it, right? Which is why you need to care about security. But we see this where they'll call your parents up and say, hey, you've been arrested by the police, you're in jail. They'll send you a voice note of your child talking. They will ask you to get on a video call with the police station. There is a person in a police uniform sitting in a police station set. It's a legitimate set that they've created. And they'll ask you to give a statement and they'll do all this stuff. And then they'll offer if you want to settle the case. And they'll ask you to transfer money via UPI to go settle the case or whatever, right? And just when you think about the amount of production value that went into that.
Incredible.
Because I've seen screenshots of those calls and it's just, there's a police station, there's a guy in the police, then they'll be like, okay, we're redirecting you to the lawyer. And they have all these people involved.
Yeah.
And then they're doing it at scale, right? There are thousands, it's a call center.
Correct.
Thousands of calls going through every day.
Yeah.
On the individual level, I think the deck's really, really stacked against individuals. But
Right.
I think you just have to be, you have to just question things a little bit, right? And it's hard. I don't have good advice to give because honestly, these scams are genuinely convincing, right?
Yeah.
When I hear of cases, I'm just like, how did you not fall for it? It's so convincing. They had a police station, they had a set. I mean, it's just, what can I tell you that will save you, right? It's just, but I think just maybe having those fundamental limits set, right? Maybe have a credit card limit set, overseas spending limit set, tap and pay limit set, just those fundamentals that make it.
Yeah. It's the funniest one is, I mean, this is a little old now, but some guys recreated a bank branch. And actually operated, and finally they got caught because people got suspicious because the service was too good. they were like, we are not used to such good service, something is off. Like literally that they were just operating for years, just operating as a branch and a very prominent, it's not like some obscure bank that people wouldn't have heard of.
Yeah.
So it's unbelievable that you can, get away with this. And you were saying just on this imitating thing, I know of cases where, and again, this happens to small companies and the largest companies in the world, where somebody will replicate their website or, social media page or whatever it is. And when I say replicate, I mean to the T. There is no way for an average person looking at it to tell the difference. I'm guessing you have encountered that very regularly. So can you walk me through that and how that works and how does the scammer make money off that? And B, what does the actual company do to tackle that issue?
Okay. So incredibly common, right? We see that with large e-commerce players. We see that with the extremely small mom and pop shops, right?
Yeah.
Folks that are 2-people teams that have an e-commerce setup that are selling stuff, right? And the unfortunate thing is they make better websites than the original even, right? Because I mean, again, it's ROI, right? They don't have a product to make. So their spending is just on the website. But we'll see it where they create complete fake e-commerce websites. They will buy a domain that's similar but better than yours. They will do SEO to really make sure that they are ranking high up there. They will pay for Google ads. We'll see that, right? They spend a lot of money on these things. They're not willing to reinvest. They might be paying through stolen credit cards, but they will spend, right? They'll do all of that. The idea is, and they'll give you attractive prices, right? They will show you the same price as the original website, but 75% sale right now, for whatever reason, right? Once you get on, they're going to ask you for your credit card details, etc. So the scam, again, it varies. It could be where they just ask you to pay and they never deliver a product, right? So that's one part, right? Easy enough. Easy enough can be done where they ask you to pay, just don't deliver. So, and you're going to Google and reviewing the original shop and saying, hey, it's a scam, they don't deliver the products, right? So it's a double whammy for those guys. So that's one that we see very common. Second is where they just steal your credit card, right? You're going and plugging in your credit card and they'll happily steal it, take it and abuse that, right? So a lot of times we'll see when we're investigating these scams, we'll see cases where you plug in your credit card and instead of that one transaction you were expecting, you'll see a dozen transactions happen at the back end. Where they've got this integrated where it's going to spend some money on Amazon to buy gift cards or some other site to buy something else. They're going to spend a whole bunch of money before you can react. And they've gotten away with it then, hopefully, right? So we'll see a lot of that happening. In terms of taking it down, so we do have the Shadowmap product that we have does monitor for this. So that helps our customers at least anytime somebody creates a fake site, steals your logo, your information, it'll show up as an alert. And then we have a process where we go through the legal process to take it down, right? Where we'll send a notice to the hosting provider or whoever it is and get them to take it offline. But it's a cat and mouse game, right? Every time you knock 2 off, 2 more come online and they keep doing it. They've got it down to science, right? They buy all the domains to crypto. They buy the hosting to crypto. It's usually hosted in China, Russia, South Africa. So it's very hard to, from a regulatory perspective, do something, right? And we'll see this not just with e-commerce, but also a lot of our non-e-commerce customers. So say, for example, a lot of the finance companies that we work with, right? Your insurance or finance companies, they will say, hey, company XYZ has started a new fund. Go invest some money. This is how you log in. This is the portal. You add money using UPI. So all of that, right? It's a very common one is a new company starting a Bitcoin ETF. And it's a legitimate large company, right? You sort of trust it more. And then the idea is, and they'll give you returns as well. They'll show you it's gone up by X% and Y%. Offer to refund the money to you, but then greed comes in where you put more money in.
It's funny hearing about this. One of the favorite things I ever heard of. I mean, not favorite in the sense that I'm not condoning it. It's the innovativeness and how well thought out it is. And from what I understand, it originated in Japan, but I'm guessing it's been replicated globally. What this guy will do is he will get into, say, 1 million accounts, like 1 million bank accounts. And every month or every quarter, he will steal like the equivalent of 1 rupee or 5 rupees or whatever. And the point is that obviously he's getting the scale, so he's still accumulating a very large amount, but the amount is such that it is not worth me, the victim, losing 1 rupee a month. It's not worth the hassle to even
make that
do anything about it. You have done, like I said, a fantastic job of actually explaining the different ways in which individuals and companies are susceptible to fall for these scams and cyber attacks. And all of this ultimately, because it's a business podcast and, in many ways focused on the public markets, ultimately, I'm just trying to figure out how I can piggyback on people like you and make money off it. So I'm trying to understand, and I mean, when I say you, I mean your company, are you considering an IPO? I can only imagine how much time you must be spending fending off acquisition offers. So what is the 3, 5, 7, 10-year plan for Security Brigade?
So I'm not entirely sure. And we've now been around for about 18, 19 years. So it's been a while.
You started when you were what?
I was 17 or 18.
Yeah, exactly.
2006 is when we formally started the company. There were a couple of years of freelancing before that. But honestly, I don't know what's next, right? Each time we think we've reached the stage where we should consider these sort of options, we end up finding new ways sort of grow, right? So in 2016, 17, Shadowmap came in, and then that opened up a bunch of European markets for us, and we started doing a lot of growth there, right? And then with the regulations where they are, I think there's a lot of regulatory pressure increasing now, right? I think it's a really good thing, but whether it's SEBI, whether it's NPCI, whether it's RBI, all of them are putting a lot of pressure on companies now to focus on cybersecurity, right? Accountability, certain with their mandate. So we are starting to see honestly, at this point, we just feel like we're trying to bail ourselves out of the water every time just to keep delivering to customers, right? There's just so much stuff coming in that the idea of spending time to focus on any other area, right, is really, really, really difficult, right? Also, because obviously, looking at an acquirer or going through an acquisition process, doing an IPO takes a lot of my bandwidth. And right now, I really, really just want to focus on growth, right? I know, because when you look at the first 15 years, right, the market wasn't where it is today, right? The first 10 years, 15 years, we only sold to banks and insurance companies, maybe those sort of guys, right? Today, we work with law firms, we work with hospitals, we work with manufacturing businesses. I mean, a customer portfolio is so diverse now.
Yeah.
But because that the market shifted completely, right? The who is your customers changed a lot. So I think right now, the next year, 2 years, 3 years, I think the focus is just to keep growing, right?
Right.
How do we hire more? How do we grow more internationally? Focus on larger sort of businesses, and then maybe we look at something in those directions post that.
And why deal with investors like me asking why aren't you growing more?
So I mean, honestly, that's one of the reasons we didn't ever go to the VC route. A lot of people have asked me over the years, right?
You're completely bootstrapped?
We're completely bootstrapped from day one, because I'm not a sales guy. I'm not a sales organization, right? We're very much a tech. I mean, I think it's an asset and a pain.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be great to have somebody running the business that's focused just on the business. But my historical view of the world, right? When I look back at companies that have come in security and come and died, and there have been a lot of them, right? That did very well and then sort of disappeared. It was always because they were sales first. And when your sales first, quality sort of takes a dip. When quality takes a dip, customers leave. When customers leave, sales dry up, right? So I've really, and from day one, we've been very focused on being tech first. Deliver value, if we're doing something, it has to be the absolute best at it, right? Even if sales disagrees or the finance part disagrees, right?
Right.
So I think that's sort of been the idea, which is why, so it's kind of been a double-edged sword there, right? But I think we've survived. It's worked well.
Yash, this was fantastic. It was equal parts fun and scary, so, which is what I imagined it would be. Thank you again for taking the time. It was fantastic having you on.
It was great to hear.